Salam everyone and welcome back to SomaliDispatch.com. Minneapolis police shot and killed a Somali American man named Dolal Idd on Wednesday night during a traffic stop. The first police involved shooting in that city since the death of George Floyd on May 25th of last year. The Council on American-Islamic Relations, CAIR, America's largest Muslim civil liberties organization, and the Somali American Community in Minneapolis are demanding an independent and transparent probe of the killing. CAIR Minneapolis Executive Director Jaylani Hussein joins us from that city to discuss the killing and other police matters. Salam Jaylani Hussein of CAIR, Minnesota. If you could start us off by telling us what transpired on Wednesday night as it relates to the killing of Jaylani Idd in your city.
Thank you for having me. Unfortunately, on Wednesday night, what we know so far is Dolal Idd was killed by Minneapolis Police. We also now have a 30-second video that shows an escalation. But what we have been able to say to folks at this moment is that the video is really inconclusive. It's not the typical process where videos are shared the day after, but that's a testament of the overwhelming awareness and wake up and protests and demands that have been happening since the killing of George Floyd. But the video does not clearly show what happened. We know that the officers involved in this case were not the typical officers. These were a specific group. So we're trying to get as much information as possible now, and we're trying to ask people to also be patient, but to recognize that police and the system continues to lie. So whatever information that they're putting out there, we need to do our own investigation into that and to come up with our own conclusion with our own eyes and with our own forensic. We know in the George Floyd case, for example, when he was killed, the medical examiner declared that he was not killed due to what we clearly all saw, 8 minutes or 46 seconds of being choked to death, that he was killed for other reasons. And it required this family to hire an outside medical examiner to come with the conclusion that we all saw, that this was actually a sophistication that happened, that he was choked to death. And so that is important at early stages we're in right now, to not make conclusions based on little information that we have. We know 3 officers shot. Those names are out so far. And tomorrow around 2 p.m., we're holding a large rally for justice for Dolal Idd and his family. And we're asking everyone to come out and to fill the streets. Minnesota is a little cold right now, but if you have your wool socks and winter socks, it's not that bad. You warm up as soon as you start moving around. So we encourage people to come and show up. Dolal Idd is just one of many victims across this country that we see continue to happen, where police officers engage in very unfortunate manner. And a lot of people are asking if he fired or what happened. We still are going to get through the bottom of that. But one thing people need to understand is just in Minnesota alone, in the Twin Cities alone, there's been at least 3 cases, one particular where a white man shot at police 40 times, injured 3 people, and did not get a scratch on him, right? So this idea that when a firefight happens or something like that, and we don't know that at this moment, they say that they claim that there's a shot fired, but until we have the actual full evidence, we cannot claim that either. Because right now the city is on edge, the entire country is on edge. So they're trying to create a narrative. They started on night 1 where they said this was a felony suspect. That doesn't mean anything. We don't know exactly what that means. This was a way to immediately start building a case against him and not a case for transparency and accountability. And that's what we were asking for. So we've been in contact with the family. We're working with them. And hopefully they will be, moving forward on this case. And tomorrow they'll be joining us at this rally, and we encourage everyone to join.
Thank you for that. There also has been an apparent further interaction with the police and the deceased family. What can you tell us about that?
Well, yeah, so the night of the incident, the family's home was raided, and they were raided with what considered to be really just an unfortunate situation where the police, in this case, not even telling this family they killed their son, and coming there gun blazing, terrorizing this family and handcuffing children and parents together. And we're hearing of this incident where there's a 4-year-old who woke up after all the other family members were handcuffed and ran out of their room and almost could have gotten killed, according to what the parents have shared with us. So it was a very dangerous situation. And then they thought that was the worst part of their day, not to know that shortly after they were going to be informed that the police have killed their son. And so just a horrible, horrible situation. And I appreciate Sahan Journal, who put out a really long article about that, and people can go look into some of the details of that. But this is the type of behavior we've seen. And it also looks like they're trying to cover up their tracks, running real quick to try to get some more evidence or anything that would help them build a case. And this is just a reality that we live in. And so, you know, I've challenged our community. A lot of times our community has a perception, a bias of police based on what happened in Somalia. Somalia's police was not this brutal, right? They were part of the community. People saw them as uncles and aunts, right? And so people don't see police in this way, but in this country, this is what they have been doing since they were the slave captures, right? And so a lot of times our community is afraid of the FBI and the border protection, because we all travel through these borders thinking somehow we've done something wrong. We're worried about crossing the border and have that anxiety. Well, that's the life of every Black person in America when a police officer drives by, right? You already worried about them stopping you, knowing that there's a chance something bad can happen just because of your color. And that should not happen. It should not happen at the border if you're Muslim. It should not happen if you're a Black person in America, especially a Black man in America. And that's what we were fighting against. And the Minnesota community has shown up for George Floyd. And we want them to continue to show up for all the victims. There's many victims since George Floyd. And this is Dolal Idd, regretfully has become another victim of Minneapolis killing.
Yeah, perhaps you can clarify this for us. Apparently there's a passenger, there was a passenger with Mr. Idd in the car. What can you tell us about that witness, perhaps, to this incident? Is
Yeah,
that witness talking?
So that's a good question to have. We don't know much about the witness at this point. There's a lot of rumors around what the role, but these are the type of questions we need to ask, because we also know victims and witnesses oftentimes are put under some sort of a police, fear. And so they sometimes act inappropriate and do things that are problematic. We know in the Isaac Aiden case, the young Somali man who was killed in Egan, we know the victim there, or the young woman who called the police on Isaac Aiden, changed her story twice during that incident. And in fact, it was the initial story that she created, which later on she changed. An hour later, it was the result of that massive response that we believe killed them. So we know that a lot of times, passengers are critically important. And we have a lot of questions about this passenger. We want to know who they are. Were they working for the police? Were they just a victim? What role did they have? And also for them to know that if they're, obviously that they have a community support to tell the truth, right? And not to line themselves up with the police narrative because they're afraid of the police, which is sadly a reality that we exist in.
Right. What is the community, along with the organizations such as yours, CAIR, is demanding? I understand that you guys are demanding an investigation. Where are we at with that? Is the police saying this is a open and shut case? Is there an investigation? Usually, even those investigations are done within. Right. So what is the community asking for here?
So CAIR, we are working with large number of organizations that have been doing this work for quite some time. So we are partnering with some of those organizations, and we have been out and protesting almost every week with this coalition for justice for Jamar, many of the other stolen families, and many other folks that a lot of people never heard of, right? And they're not on the headlines. So we're demanding the same thing we have been demanding for all these families, which is, number one, we want justice. And that looks like a transparent investigation. Right now, the BCA is in charge. It's too early for them to determine anything. But while they're investigating, we also want those footages and those videos to come out. The names of the officers came out just yesterday. We also have specific other demands that we want from the mayor and the police chief to release because this is critical information to us. Right now, the number one question that they have failed to answer is what was the reason for the stop? Why did they even pull him out? And that's going to be critically important moving forward. And as you mentioned to the other point, what did the witnesses and other people saw? The good thing is this area was well lit, and obviously there's a store there, a Holiday gas station. So we're hoping that there'll be enough footages to at least hopefully learn more. What we saw there was something that got accelerated in a very short period of time, and there's just too much information right now that we don't have. We know that this young man has been turning a corner. His family has talked about that. But the reality we have to believe is the police have historically lied. The police will continue to lie. They'll continue to protect themselves. And sadly to say, just for this audience, I want them to know, just 2 weeks ago, Sahan Journal uncovered documents from the Minneapolis Police Department of a police officer who was fired, who was involved in another incident where they pulled over a group of Somali teens for the wrong reason. And they threatened them. And one of the threats that we never learned about until now was that they threatened and said that that they are proud to be racist, but even specifically mentioning the Black Hawk Down incident and saying, we wish the US Rangers killed more Somalis because then you wouldn't be here. So, this is Minneapolis Police Department has a long way to go before we can say we have any trust, because majority of the officers don't live in the neighborhood. They're white, and some of the racist union leader named Bob Kroll, who actually wanted this particular officer who was fired, rehired by the union, and through arbitration eventually fired, to actually be to come back, right? An officer who says, I'm proud to be racist, an officer who says there should be mass murder by US Army. That kind of officer should never be on any force, should not be working anywhere. But this union leader wanted him back. And that's the challenge we see right now, that in Minneapolis, the police department really is in shambles. And the reason why is because you have a racist police department, which we have learned from, unofficially from other Somali police officers who work for the Minneapolis Police Department, that they have also faced a great deal of racism from other white officers in the department.
That actually answers my next question, which was maybe more police involvement in terms of enlisting in the police is needed. But like you just said, that might not even solve anything, right? Or not solve the majority of the issues. It's also interesting to me, as someone who lives in Canada, that Minneapolis is looked upon by the Somali community everywhere, including those at home, that you guys made a significant headway in integrating in society and actually holding offices in multi-level governmental bodies. To have this happening in your city is just mind-boggling to us. Is there anything the community can do to get ahead of these problems, one would ask? What's your opinion on that?
That's a good question. I think one thing you have to understand, I think there's a tremendous progress in the community here, particularly around political power and organizing, but I think we're still at the infancy rate. And I think the issue that we're trying to address here is bigger than the Somali community. Somali, we're the latest of the immigrant Black community here in America. We're settling here in the 90s. But this issue of police brutality is actually an issue that has existed since the inception of this country. And so it's an issue that we all need to take a lead on. And, we recognize right now in Minneapolis that George Floyd happened here. It didn't happen anywhere else. And we have an opportunity to fight for George Floyd's family and all of these other families. And we realize if we don't, just like every day, we're seeing incidents like this come up. So I think we have an opportunity to make an impact and make a change and lead the nation in really creating more better policies around police accountability. I think it's evident that to also notice that even in this moment right now, that yes, our political leaders who are Somali should be taking a note and taking leadership right now in this space. We have to shed off our immigrant mentality and realize that we are the reason why America is successful. It's because of the immigrant stories. Our families, our parents are working in the factories that are creating the economy that's turning in America. We are working hard to be the future, and every immigrant story is about that. And so I think this issue of police brutality is a critical issue. I think we should not shy away from it. And I think this is a moment right now where we also need to let our youth lead. Right after George Floyd was killed, it was young Somali kids who were out there protesting. in defiance of what was going on. In fact, I think there was a story of a young Somali girl who threw back one of the grenades that they threw at her. And it just showed that it's not just our youth, but it's also especially our young Somali sisters who are taking amazing leadership into this. So we are heartbroken. We are frustrated right now. But I think our hearts are together to make sure that we fight. And our immigrant story is just one narrative. But I believe that Dolal Idd was killed not because he was Somali. He was killed because he's a Black person in America. And that's how these police officers see us first. The Somali part is just for us because that immigrant story is important to us, but it's not important into the context of American policing in this country. And sadly to say, this may not be the last killing by the Minneapolis police, but if we do not make demands and take serious note, this will continue to happen, and we're continuing to see that.
Right. And lastly, again, I thank you for your time, and I understand your multitasking as we talk to you, and we appreciate that. Do you think the Minneapolis police learned anything from the brutal killing of George Floyd in May of last year? Given the riots and the Black Lives Matter movements actually coming to the forefront with demands such as defunding the police, and it's heard all over the world and is supported in all over the world. Did the police in Minneapolis learn anything? Much less the United States police forces.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope they have learned something. But at the same time, what the challenge we have is we have policies in place that continue to perpetuate this issue, right? We have the same police officers who were working the day George Floyd was killed that are still working, right? Their mentality, the rules that they have to apply, their practices are still the same. They're still allowed a great deal of discretion when they shoot and fire. Those policies need to be changed. And that's something that we at CAIR and many of our coalition partners are working toward this year to make sure that law enforcement use of power is changed to be more appropriate so that they're held at a higher standard. Right now, they're not. They could fire just because they're startled. They could get fired. They've been given permission to shoot without any excuses, and that's an unfortunate reality. But that's what they're governing. So I think they all are feeling the pressure from the community. We have been protesting. We have created enough pressure, but I think unless the policies change and also we create limits to what they do and what type of responses that they make, it's going to be critical. We have created an army called police. I mean, the United States, from what I would consider probably in the early, since World War II almost, we have seen the heathens from leaders like Eisenhower and others who were part of the military-industrial complex demanding for that industry to have checked. And now they have seeped into everything. They have now control the United States Army, and they now also have leached into the policing in the cities. And for us Somalis, I would say the concept of militarized business, which is now what Somalia is relying on. The African Union troops are internationally privatized military that has no real reasons to leave because they're incentivized to stay. And that's what's happening all over the world. And since actually since the Gulf War, the United States has fed and created this privatization of militaries all over the world. And right now we can't put them back into the bottle, and now they're seeping in. So for example, the city of Minneapolis receives military equipment from the United States Army. This equipment, when it was intended by Halliburton and these countries, was to use on the battlefield where there's another army equal that they're fighting. But now those equipments are now in the hands of police officers against peaceful protesters most of the times, because a lot of the times that's not happening on the street. So this is a bigger issue than just policing. This is about policy. This is really about private corporate greed in the military system that is fueling and is everywhere now. And in fact, if we look at it, it's everywhere, right? It's just this week alone, we see that the defense bill gets passed, but not the $2,000 checks for Americans, citizens who are struggling through the pandemic. What did that tell you? That tells you how powerful the military industrial complex is and how they are prioritized over the average citizens. And so we've got a long work to do, but I think for Muslims particularly, I think they need to be encouraged that the fight for civil rights and the fight for holding police accountable has been actually a symbol of the Muslim movement in America. Through the Nation of Islam and others, you see Malcolm X, you see Muhammad Ali, you see important figures of historical American civil rights movement have been Muslims. To today, we learn about Colin Kaepernick, but we don't celebrate Mahmoud Abdul Rauf, who stood against the NBA, who was kicked out from the NBA, right? And so Muslims have a legacy of standing on the front lines, and I think we need to continue to do that.
And I think that should be easy with a Muslim Attorney General in your state, Keith
Yes.
Ellison. Shout out to him, and hopefully
Yes.
he will intervene in this and other matters as well. I would like to end for the few seconds that we got left for you to reiterate some of the actions planned for tomorrow for bringing light into what has happened on Wednesday. If you can go over that one more time, would be a great point to end, I think.
So tomorrow at 2 p.m., right where Dolal was killed, I believe it's 35th and Central Avenue, or 35th and Cedar, which is the Holiday gas station. We will be organizing a rally with our partner organizations. We'll have a few speakers. People will speak. I believe the family will also be there and speaking. And then we will be hopefully marching. So this is a moment to show the city of Minneapolis and the rest of the country and the world that we will not rest and we will not allow for another killing by the Minneapolis Police Department. We will continue to demand for a transparent and open investigation and for us to make our own determination of what happened, not the Minneapolis Police Department to tell us what happened, because they have shown historically and others that they will continue to lie about their transgressions, and we will not let that happen.
Thank you. Jaylani Hussein is the chair of Minnesota CAIR. He's the executive director, actually. I should say thank you for joining us. He joined us from Minneapolis. Until next time, I wish you good luck and keep up the good work. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Take care.